For decades, Kristofferson let his songs speak where other artists might have offered explanations. He rarely turned interviews into confessionals, and he never seemed interested in public sympathy. Instead, he built a reputation on honesty within his art and restraint within his personal life. When he passed away peacefully at his home in Maui on September 28, surrounded by family, tributes flowed from every corner of the entertainment world. Fellow musicians, actors, and admirers remembered him as a fearless songwriter, a thoughtful actor, and a man who walked away from conventional expectations to pursue something more meaningful. At 88, many viewed his passing as the natural close of a remarkable life. Yet behind the public remembrance was a more layered story, one his family would only begin to clarify with time. What emerged later was not scandal, but context. It was a portrait of a man navigating complex health challenges while trying to protect the dignity of his legacy. In the months following his passing, Kristofferson's family chose restraint. Their initial statement was simple and respectful, emphasizing peace and gratitude rather than medical specifics. For some observers, the brevity raised questions, but for those closest to him, silence was not secrecy for its own sake. It was continuity. Throughout his life, Kristofferson had resisted turning private hardship into public narrative. He believed that the work should endure on its own terms. His wife of more than 4 decades, Lisa Mayers, and their children had long understood this preference. They had already spent years helping him manage health concerns quietly, without drawing attention or reframing his identity around illness. To them, honoring his wishes meant allowing the first wave of remembrance to focus on the art, not the ailments. Only later, with distance and reflection, would they feel ready to share a fuller account of what those final years truly involved. Long before the public noticed any change, Kristofferson's inner circle had begun adapting to subtle shifts in his health. Memory lapses appeared gradually. At first, they were small: a misplaced word, a forgotten appointment, a pause mid-conversation. For a man whose life revolved around language, even minor disruptions carried weight. Over time, the lapses became harder to dismiss. He sometimes struggled to recall lyrics he had written decades earlier, words that had once come effortlessly. His family observed not just forgetfulness, but frustration. Kristofferson had always valued clarity of thought, and any threat to that clarity felt deeply personal. Still, he continued to write, to record, and to perform. Audiences often saw only a seasoned artist aging naturally. Behind the scenes, however, Lisa Mayers was increasingly present, offering gentle reminders and quiet support. She did so without spectacle, ensuring that his public appearances retained the composure and integrity he cherished. Medical consultations initially pointed toward familiar explanations. Given his history of physically demanding activities in his youth, including sports and military training, doctors considered neurological conditions associated with aging and past injuries. At various points, Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia were suggested. These assessments carried emotional weight. Kristofferson accepted them with characteristic stoicism, trusting medical advice even as the diagnosis felt daunting. Treatments followed, including medications aimed at cognitive decline and mood stabilization. According to later family accounts, the results were mixed at best. Some symptoms persisted, and others intensified. Fatigue deepened. Confusion sometimes seemed more pronounced. Meanwhile, he experienced additional physical discomfort that did not always align neatly with a single diagnosis. The complexity of his condition left his family searching for clarity. Through it all, Kristofferson avoided public commentary. He continued appearing when he could, maintaining professionalism while privately navigating uncertainty about his own health. A pivotal turning point came years later when a new medical evaluation reconsidered earlier assumptions. Rather than focusing solely on cognitive symptoms, physicians examined a broader pattern that included physical pain and neurological irregularities. Eventually, he was treated for Lyme disease, a condition that can mimic other neurological disorders when left undiagnosed. According to his family, the shift in treatment brought noticeable improvements. His clarity sharpened. Energy returned in ways that felt almost restorative. Friends described the change as remarkable. For Kristofferson and those around him, it was both a relief and a lesson in medical complexity. The experience underscored how challenging accurate diagnosis can be, especially when symptoms overlap across conditions. While the treatment did not erase every difficulty, it offered renewed presence and time that he would later spend more deliberately, stepping back from public demands and recentering his life around family, reflection, and quieter forms of creativity. As his health stabilized but remained unpredictable, Kristofferson made a conscious decision to narrow his world. He and Lisa settled more fully in Hana, a secluded area of Maui known for its calm pace and natural beauty. For him, it was less an escape and more a return to simplicity. Friends who visited described an environment that felt grounded and protective. The pressures of touring, promotion, and constant travel faded. In their place came routine: walks, writing sessions, conversations with family, and long stretches of quiet. Kristofferson had spent decades navigating public expectation. In Hana, he could exist without performance. This transition was not framed as retirement at first. It was gradual, almost organic. Appearances became less frequent. Commitments were carefully chosen. Yet even in retreat, he did not abandon his creative instincts. He continued shaping ideas into songs and reflections, driven not by industry timelines, but by personal necessity. By the time he officially retired from performing in the early 2020s, the decision felt aligned with a broader shift in priorities. Public statements emphasized age and health, both accurate but incomplete. Privately, his family understood that maintaining artistic standards mattered deeply to him. He did not want to appear on stage uncertain of lyrics or dependent on heavy support. Audiences had given him decades of attention and respect. He wanted to reciprocate by stepping away before performance became compromise. This choice reflected a lifelong pattern. Kristofferson had often chosen integrity over convenience, whether leaving a stable career early in life to pursue songwriting or resisting trends that might have diluted his voice. Retirement, then, was not surrender. It was consistency. He preferred to let the existing body of work stand strong rather than risk diminishing it. In doing so, he preserved not only his legacy, but also his sense of self. Within the family, preparations for this transition were thoughtful and measured. Responsibilities shifted gradually. His son Johnny, trained in law, became increasingly involved in managing business affairs and the music catalog. The goal was not reinvention but stewardship. Kristofferson's songs had long been regarded as literary in their depth and emotional candor. Protecting that catalog meant safeguarding context, quality, and intention. The family approached it as caretakers rather than marketers. They sought partnerships that would honor the original spirit of the work. This internal reorganization also offered Kristofferson reassurance. Even as memory fluctuated, his values remained consistent. He cared about craft, fairness, and artistic independence. Knowing that these principles would endure through his children provided comfort. The transition underscored a broader theme of his later years: quiet continuity. Rather than dramatic farewells, he favored steady handoffs, ensuring that what he built would outlast him responsibly. 1 year after his passing, the family chose to share additional insight into his final health challenges. They explained that he had been living with Lewy body dementia, a condition characterized by fluctuating cognition and physical symptoms. The diagnosis helped clarify patterns that earlier labels had not fully captured. Importantly, the revelation was framed not as correction or controversy, but as context. The family emphasized that Kristofferson himself had requested discretion. He did not want illness to overshadow a lifetime of creative contribution. By waiting, they allowed public memory to center first on his achievements. Only later did they provide the medical clarity that might help others understand similar experiences. This measured disclosure reflected the same values that shaped his life: dignity, patience, and thoughtful timing. It also invited broader awareness of neurological conditions that remain misunderstood, transforming private struggle into a potential source of shared understanding. Tributes from fellow artists reinforced how deeply Kristofferson's influence extended. Musicians across genres described his songwriting as fearless and humane. Actors recalled his generosity on set. Younger performers spoke about mentorship and quiet guidance. These reflections reframed his later silence not as disappearance, but as deliberate retreat. He had not been forgotten. He had stepped back intentionally. The respect evident in these tributes suggested that his peers understood that choice. They saw a man who valued substance over spectacle and who resisted the impulse to turn vulnerability into branding. In that sense, the silence aligned with his artistry. His songs often explored flawed humanity with compassion and restraint. His life mirrored that approach. Even in decline, he sought coherence between the person and the work. The tributes became less about nostalgia and more about continuity, emphasizing how his values had quietly shaped those who followed. In his final years, Kristofferson continued writing when energy allowed. The process was slower, sometimes fragmented, yet no less sincere. These later pieces reportedly reflected themes of reconciliation, acceptance, and time. They were not crafted as grand statements but as personal meditations. After his passing, the family announced plans to gather these works into a collection, presenting them not as a marketing event but as completion. The intention was to offer listeners a final window into his reflective phase. Alongside this project, the family established a foundation to support emerging artists without financial backing. This initiative echoed Kristofferson's own unconventional path. Early in life, he had taken risks to pursue art over security. By assisting others facing similar crossroads, the foundation transforms legacy into opportunity. In that way, his final chapter extends forward, linking private resilience with public generosity and ensuring that silence, too, carries meaning.